Welcome to Evolving on Purpose with Matt Swartz. This podcast is where real leaders share the inner work behind their breakthroughs and where you'll find the tools and stories to work through whatever is holding you back from who you're meant to be so you can make the impact you're here to make and help change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back for our coaching episode for Wren. I am back with Wren Buse. Wren Buse is a board-certified music therapist, musician, and podcast host. In their clinical work, Wren creates an identity-affirming space where curiosity and self-exploration are encouraged, and where music is used as a tool for personal growth, healing, and community. They're passionate about using music in their personal and professional life and share interviews about meaningful experiences with music on their podcast, Magical Moments with Music. Wren, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to be with you. So, coaching episode as always, universal disclaimer. Coaching is not therapy. I am not here today to provide any medical advice, any treatment, any assessment, any of that. We are identifying a challenge in our life and we're working through that challenge. If the listener is experiencing any sort of mental health crisis, I encourage them to contact the support they have in their lives, 988, or reach out for emergency support. But we are here to coach. Cool. Glad to have you, Wren. So before we got on a little bit last time, today we kind of identified that the area that you wanted to work on was specifically where you're noticing trouble getting some traction on moving forward with podcast stuff that you're doing. So I think the best way to start is kind of give me a little once over around, the work you're doing with your podcast and where you're feeling stuck. And we'll kind of dive in. And then I will explain a little more later, but Wren took the flow quiz, which you guys have access to. You can take that in the description. And so we've identified some key areas that kind of synergize with this challenge that they're working through. So Wren, kind of lay out the challenge and we'll get into the nitty gritty as we go along.
Yeah. So I am a one-person show when it comes to my podcast. And there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes. There's scheduling interviews, writing out questions and preparing for the interview, the editing after, posting it online. And then I also have some episodes that are music-based. And that's like a whole other beast that takes a lot of creativity, sometimes collaboration. And so I'm finding that different parts of the process are difficult for me to get through. Something like the editing is really easy to get through because I'm so excited because it's like the episode is almost there and I'm just getting to piece it together. But preparing for an interview and reaching out and scheduling and some of that other behind the scenes stuff it's really difficult for me to get motivated for that.
Yeah, totally. And then you kind of alluded to the music stuff, and that's another beast. Like, tell me about the beast, or tell me about like what goes on there and the parts that are easy or the parts that are hard.
Yeah. I think the music part is kind of twofold. I think on one hand, there can just be a lot of moving pieces. So in the past, I've done a collaboration with one of my guests on a new song that we wrote based off of a book. And that's like a lot of communication back and forth. I send my part, you send your part back, going back and forth, all the way to the finishing touches. So keeping up on all of that through the whole experience is very difficult. And then, for example, what I'm working on right now is I have a upcoming guest who has written some poetry, and I'm taking some of that poetry and setting it to music. And there's, of course, the logistics behind it and making sure I have enough time for it. But I am also noticing a little bit of insecurity, too, of I feel confident about something that I create personally, but then sharing it is very intimidating, sharing that publicly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting because yes, this podcast is newer, but I've done podcasting in different respects. This is technically my third, right? And it's so interesting when I'm talking with a fellow podcaster, like, what parts are easy and what parts are hard? You started like, oh, the editing's great because I literally the worst part for me. Like, I could not. Yeah, that is so it's just funny, right? We all have these, you can look at the same challenge and obviously we're all approaching it differently. So, this may seem super basic, but one of the first things I tend to do when I'm looking at but I don't, whether you want to call it procrastination or trouble executing or whatever executive functioning around your podcast. Is that fair? Can we call it like executive functioning? Absolutely. As somebody who has a history with ADHD, right? And whose the initial solution was focus, which, tends not to when you are approaching a project, and of course it may be different, talk to me about the sort of inner voice relationship with self piece of this, right? Do you tend to be very encouraging with yourself? Do you tend to be more rigid? What's that relationship like as you're working yourself through this project specifically?
Definitely not rigid.
Cool. Great.
But I think I've previously really struggled with not feeling good enough, or that I need to produce more work, all that. And I think I've almost overcorrected in a way, where now I'll almost reason with myself of saying, well, I had this idea for years, and in this time frame, I've already done 5 or 6 episodes. So I'm already doing better than I previously was, but I'm still not holding up to what I committed to, the creation that I want to make. Yeah. So there's some initial stuff around not enoughness, and then overcorrecting. And the overcorrecting, what did that look like when you think about the overcorrection? I think just not holding myself accountable to my vision and what I know that I can do, and not in a way where I have to do this, but I have a lot of talents and skills, and I know that I'm not using them to the extent that I want to, the extent that I could. Totally. So for me, what I'm always, when I'm looking at a project like this, and, if it's helpful, we can talk about the 1.5 years it took me to get my butt in gear to finally get back to the third podcast. So it is, I'm always looking at the project as a mirror for the patterns rather than a problem to solve. Right? Because I'm not so interested in oh, great, I'll solve this problem in this situation, but then it'll be back a year later or 2 years later in that context or this context or whatever. So I'm kind of looking at it okay, what is this project telling me about where I'm at in my healing and growth in general? Is that a fair framework? Yeah. Totally. So I think, we learned from your first episode that it would probably be safe to say there's been a whole trajectory around self-worth and all of that before I'm only coming back to that because you keep coming back to that. So you've said it twice, so I can't not pull on the cord, right? I think importantly, how do you feel that's grown or improved for you first? Yeah, I think part of it is that I really let my self-worth get wrapped up in what I was doing, and whatever that output is from whatever I was working on. And I think now I see my worth individually in a way that's separate from the work that I do. And I think just in general, I was kind of mean to myself when I would not get work done. So I think what it used to look like is a lot of negative self-talk during the whole experience of procrastinating, putting things off that I know that I can do, and not necessarily reaching my potential. Whereas now it's that negative self-talk just isn't there.
Yeah. But neither is the, you know, all
The
of the
extra motivation.
productivity. Yeah, exactly. And this is, I had a sense that was part of the answer. And the reason I'm diving into this, because I think it's so relatable for a lot of people that are in the like the zone you're in right now, which is like, yeah, like I'm not doing that anymore, but now some of the motivation is gone. Like, how do because I'm not like bullying myself or propelling myself into this with fear or anger anymore, or guilt or what, like there's less negative emotional motivation now. So the gas pedal isn't as gassy, right? Because I was using those negative things to motivate myself. Does that connect with your experience?
Yes, very much. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's just like trying to play to these, you know, sort of very common paradigms that I think our listeners are going to be encountering. And it's like, yeah, what do you do to motivate yourself when you're not bullying yourself that way anymore? Do you, like, if a client asked you that, like, what advice would you give a client to, you know, that question?
I think somewhere along the lines of finding motivation in a way that's, I think, still tied to the self, but not in like a negative way, in a, you know, I want to do this because I will feel very fulfilled. I will feel like I'm being creative, and I love being creative. I will feel like I'm doing these things that align with myself. So, or with themselves.
Totally. Yeah. Totally. So you can look at that from multiple angles, but yeah, I mean, I think it's great advice, right? Like, one is describing to self how we will feel once we get there, maybe, right? Is one component of this. There's also, like, you started to hit on the like identity piece. You kind of kissed it a little, and I would just like tease that out of like, I am someone who blank, right? Like, I begin to build identity around, you know, and it can be super generic, like I am powerful, or it can be very specific, like, you know, I'm putting music out into the world, right? And so, but does that make sense if I kind of contrast the difference between like just the emotion and the identity piece?
Yeah.
And I think they're both important. I don't think one is necessarily better than the other. I think probably part of a complete breakfast. I think the identity stuff is very enduring, but there's pluses and minuses to any of these sort of strategies, right? But I agree that both of those strategies are better than bullying yourself. So cool. I think, you know, for me, like you're giving individual strategies, which I think is great. Like, the larger umbrella is like, so if it's not bullying, well, then it's got to be in like intrinsic positive, you know, feelings and motivation, right? But I think that finding that can be harder than you think, even for something you love. Like, sounds like you love music. You've got it over here and you've got it over here. Fair. Yeah. I mean, like, are you feeling burnt out on music, or are you still very passionate about all the facets of that in your life?
It's not that I'm feeling burnt out on music. It's that I'm having a hard time engaging with music in the ways that I want to right now, because I've had an uptick in hand pain, like chronic hand pain. And it's been so bad recently that I haven't even been able to play piano. And that is the instrument that I'm feeling the most drawn to these days. And I get a little stuck sometimes because I have this thing that I want to do. I want to express myself in this specific way, and I can't do that. I know realistically I could do something else that's creative. Like, I could work on songwriting or singing. There's plenty of other things that I can do that I can engage in music and my creativity with, but not in the way that I'm most wanting. And so because of that, I'm just not engaging with it as much as I normally do.
grandma's sister was a Juilliard trained pianist. Trigger warning for unpleasant things coming up if anybody wants to cover their ears. She was, I mean, just brilliant pianist, right? And she was out mowing her lawn. And she ended up getting her fingers got caught down to like the two of them, down to the first knuckle. And she had to learn how to play piano with like basically thimbles on, right? Like she had to like, because, this was, I mean, what, 1930, 40, whatever, right? She had to figure it out, right? Yeah. Maybe 50, maybe I'm exaggerating. But sorry, I thought of that, right? Like, oh God, like what do you do when access to your craft is taken away, right? Like for me, I think about all the time, like if I woke up blind, like, oh my God, like there's so much of what I do I'm cueing off of your facial expressions and your physical movements. And even though I do it online, right? Even more so, perhaps, like this little box becomes so important. So is that something recent, or how long has that been going on with your hand stuff?
It's on and off. But it's been probably about a month that I haven't been able to play long enough that I get what I want to out of it, because I have to play safely. So I have to warm up. I have to be gentle. And sometimes it's like, that's all I can do before the pain creeps in. And I luckily am in a place in my life. I think back in my music conservatory days, I would have just pushed through. But now I know that that's just going to make things worse.
Yeah. Were you still having the same sort of stuck challenges around some of the podcast stuff before the hand stuff, and that exacerbated it? Or do you feel like that's one of the main catalysts that's made it harder to kind of work through some of the stuff you have to do?
I think the way that they're intertwined is that I think that I was having the issue with motivation before that, but I think that it's just kind of exacerbated the issue.
For sure.
Because I don't have my personal creative outlet in the same way. And it's making like the music aspect of the podcast a little bit harder too.
What is your second favorite instrument if piano's your first? Right now. And I get it like changes, right? So I'm not,
Yeah. Probably, I would say French horn, because that's what my primary instrument was all through school. But it's just not realistic that I practice that these days. But I guess I would say voice. So singing. Yeah.
Have you, and I'm about to like get into like, I'm talking to a musician about music stuff and I'm an amateur. So, like set me straight or anything. Do you enjoy the sort of like editing aspects of the music? Like if you're, singing to yourself and you're getting it on, whatever you're getting it on GarageBand, probably something much more advanced than that. You tell me what you use. Like, do you enjoy the arrangement pieces and the editing stuff, or not so much?
I don't as much, because I don't have a lot of skills in that. So if I'm going into creative mode, it's more, I like to enjoy, like I'll just put on some music and then I'll improvise harmonies and counter melodies and just like play with a song that I already really love. Or for funsies, I'll go back and I'll pull out the, like the Italian arias, like songs that I guess to the average person, it sounds like opera. And I'll do that because I love the experience. It's such a huge physical release. Cause when you're singing like that, your whole instrument is your body. And it's so hard to describe if you've never, if your body has never had sound come out of it like that, how intense it can feel. But I love doing that and getting that whole body feeling.
Yeah. Is that something that's accessible to you right now?
Yes and no, because I get shy about that. And I have a roommate. And she works from home, so she's home a lot. So but I often do that when she's away. I think realistically I can just be like, hey, I'm a little shy. Can you put your headphones on? And it's not a big deal.
And I'm guessing you don't have access to like a practice room or something like that reliably.
Not reliably.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I'm just like, I think you get the idea. I'm just like rooting around in here, right?
Yeah.
Like, where is this? And what I tend to do, when I'm helping a person to kind of work through some of this is I'm just trying to start practical. We can get into all the deep stuff later, but like, yeah, so there are these things and I enjoy doing these things and this isn't working because X and this isn't working because Y, right? And I don't think those are excuses. Like this comes back to like our initial discussion, like you're launched and you're figuring out your own life and you're doing all of that. And it means you're living with a roommate. And that means it's bringing up this. So we're back to what you've already identified as a core issue here, which is like, there's this other self-conscious piece, right? And connected to self-esteem. But I'm thinking as I'm like rooting around in here, chronic physical issue, probably not the best place to push through, right? Shyness around your gift, living with somebody, like, is this an area that you feel interested? Not my job, right? But do you feel interested to grow in that area? Or is that something that feels like a pretty clear boundary for you and that's not where you would want to put your energy?
I think it is where I would want to put my energy. And I think as we've been talking, I thought about when I was in university, and I was learning guitar, I don't remember what happened. I had some hand injury and I can only play with one hand. And I remember my guitar teacher, I remember being so annoyed with him at the moment, but he gets this big smile on his face and he's like, oh, this is the perfect opportunity for you to focus on your right hand. Like, I'm super annoyed because I can't do what I want to do. And he's like, no, this is great. You can't use your left hand. So you're going to really dial in on that right hand or whichever hand it was. And I think, even though I was really annoyed in the moment, I think that attitude really shifted something for me. And that's something I do with my clients all the time is they're like, oh, well, I can't do this. I'm like, what an opportunity. And so I'm kind of starting to think of this as like, I can't play piano in the way that I want to, but there's all these other things that I do want to do. And I don't have my piano time, so I got time for it.
I call it personal growth Jenga. Okay, so we're set up in front of the Jenga blocks and we start trying to figure out where the loose ones are, right? Oh no, that one's hard. Okay. That one's hard. No. Oh, that went right through. Okay, cool. Like that's where we're at, right? Like, we're 3 steps beyond where we started. And I could have stayed working on like kind of core executive functioning stuff, but very quickly, you said to me, like, there's a self-esteem thing here. And I kept trying to steer you to something a little more concrete, and your nervous system was just bringing us here. So we just want to follow, like I always tell everybody, like, I know exactly what the person needs to work on in the first 5 minutes they enter the room, right? Like it's right there. We don't need to go searching. So, you keep bringing yourself back to this. And then we go, okay, so where I go, and I'm just trying to explain some of this so people, we have these techniques, right? Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Like, okay, cool. So we've identified this bigger area called like self-worth, self-esteem. And then, I'm kind of exploring a little like what's worked for you, what's that journey looked like, getting some data there. And then pretty quickly you're going into like, this is what I love and this is what I want to do. This is something that I want to embody, right? I want to be able to do this music. Oh, and then I was talking about like clients that have these physical issues or physical limitations, right? So obviously, speaking as somebody who doesn't have like, I got a body, but things are going pretty okay. The reality is that we all have different physical or emotional limitations, right? And there's areas like we can't go, and there's areas we shouldn't go, and there's areas we probably shouldn't go, and there's areas we can go, right? Like me, I know this isn't the same. I'm a tiny boy. I'm like, my wife says I'm not 5'4", but I would like to say that I'm near that. Like, yeah, I'm not playing basketball, right? And it doesn't matter how much I want to play basketball. It's not happening, right? So in that moment, I like this example that you went to because I think this is perfect. It's like, okay, so I'm trying to practice guitar. I don't have one hand. I'm betting, is it the hand you pick with that you had, or which hand did you have?
I don't remember at this point, but I know that through the years I have had issues with either one of my hands, and I've been in a situation where I have to focus on either one of them.
The other hand, right? And so, whether it's the other hand, right, or whatever it is, it's okay, kind of driving you into this situation, and you're like, oh, I think it's singing. I think it's, but here's my challenge. But if this is the soft Jenga block, then this is like, you could spend hours trying to go back to the old pattern and force yourself to get the work done, right? And it's just not going to be sustainable. But if your time and energy, or at least some of it, is best spent like leaning into this challenge, like all of these side quests are for the main quest. Mm-hmm. Like it's not a diversion. Like we have an idea of what productivity is supposed to look like, whatever, from school, from culture, any of that. But the reality is that the side quests we take, the side quests that I took before I got back to the podcasting, any of that, these are essential. I don't know. Does that feel appropriate and helpful given that block of like the self-consciousness in regards to the singing?
Yeah, it does. And related, but when you were talking about identity, it reminded me about how when I was writing my bio for this, I was feeling really overwhelmed about choosing what words to describe me. Because I said I am a music therapist, a musician, and a podcast host. And I had a lot of stuff come up with that. So that's, yeah.
Yeah. In like, those things didn't feel true enough, or like, what was the emotion there when you were doing that?
I think I know a lot of musicians have the experience of, am I ready to call myself a musician? Am I not? And some people feel very strongly that you can't call yourself a musician unless you're a professional musician who is making their living doing music. And then some people are like, no, if you make music and you're a musician. And I think I'm somewhere in between. But I think that in a way, I think my musician identity has gotten so wrapped up into my music therapist identity that I sometimes forget that I can call myself a musician separately. And I mean, that's been my whole journey the past couple of years, is redefining my relationship with music and learning to love music on my own terms again after choosing a field where I use music every single day. I mean, a chef goes to work and cooks all day. Are they going to cook something special for themselves when they get home? Am I going to go make music when I get home? I have to, because I know I love it, and I have to stick with that my own core relationship with music, and in order to be able to do what I do professionally.
Yeah. And I just think there's so much nuance to all of that, right? Like what's coming up for me is like, so like in the private moments, right? What are the ways of that feel good to you and feel natural to you and work for you? Not what did work, but what works now, right? Is it singing? Is it getting back on the French horn? Is it, right? And I get, there's a million variations here, but I'm going to go back to the podcast for a second. So it's like, I think podcasts can go through seasons I don't think it ever has to be like one thing. And so, my question would be, based on where you're at right now and what you're feeling, right? What needs to change about the podcast, maybe, to make it easier, right? Like what barriers could you remove, or what tweaks could you make? And I'm just, rattling off for a second, like, okay, well, maybe you're in a season where it feels better to feature other people rather than yourself, right? Okay, like that's nothing crazy. Or, you're thinking about like what, does make sense for you, and okay, well, I can feature this. And yeah, I was going to play piano to this person's poetry, but like, fire up the computer, and yeah, I guess we're doing some harmonies, or I guess we're right, like some sort of a cappella, kind of piece, or right, whatever. And again, I'm not saying do any of these things. I'm just like sort of describing the process of what needs to change to fit me where I'm at, rather than what do I need to change to fit expectation or structure I created for myself that needs to adapt or evolve.
Yeah. I think when I started my podcast, I think I set my expectations a little too high for myself. I was like, I'm going to do an episode every week. And that is so unsustainable for a beginner podcaster who's doing it all by themselves. And I think I let go of that structure. I very quickly realized once a week was not going to work for me. But I don't think I replaced that. I don't think I set a new guideline for myself. Not necessarily that I have to post every single 2 weeks or I have to do this, but I feel like I just didn't create enough structure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So interesting. So here it's like the structure got dissolved, but we haven't built a structure like a new scaffolding. And again, if that scaffolding were to reflect like where you're at right now, you don't need to have it all figured out in this moment, but like, is there an aspect of that structure or scaffolding that feels compelling to put in place right now?
I think what I would love to do is have support and not be a one-person show.
Yeah. But
it's difficult because that costs money that I do not have at this time. Unless I were to like enlist a friend or something.
Isn't that great when you prove yourself wrong in 5 seconds? That's like, so limiting belief, sorry, it has to cost money. Like, let me be absolutely clear. And I shout out to Stacy right now. I have a podcast producer who, because she is earlier in her career, was offering, I found her online and she was like, I want to do this for free to learn some of these things. I would not be doing this right now were it not for that. And the only difference is that I was foolish enough to be like, yeah, maybe I could find somebody that would want to do it with me, like, and I mean, you literally said like you enjoy, I'm coming back. You said you like the editing. Did I hear that right? Is that really still true?
Okay, so I don't like the editing itself, but it's easier for me to get through because I get so excited that I can finally hear the episode come together. And that's where I feel the drive again. I think of everything I do, the thing I enjoy most is the actual interviews.
Yeah.
That's like,
what's the hardest part?
Getting myself to do all the little things.
Yeah, it's the little things. It's the scheduling and the, this and the that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have somebody that could help you out with it? And if not, could you be open to finding that,
Mm-hmm. I think I would be open to finding that. I don't know that I have people in my life that have the time to dedicate to support me with this. I think that previously, I don't think I would have been as open to it because I really wanted to make sure that my vision for the podcast is what it is. And I think by taking control in the beginning and seeing everything through from start to finish and having I have an example, like, this is what my podcast looks like. This is the whole intention of it. I think I would be willing to let someone support that.
So I think, the risk of being a little too like big, deep, right? Like, for me, and I see this in the work that I do with almost everybody I work with, right? We've been enculturated and indoctrinated to see success as such an individual metric, right? Like, productivity equals me making myself do things. And it's a cultural value. It's not necessarily 100% accurate or true depending on the context or the situation. And anybody I know that's created big things, they've done it with a team. And one of the really interesting evolutions in the self-esteem thing is the movement from, I'm not good enough to, like, I'm okay. But then, like, this movement from, like, I'm okay to, like, I don't have to be it all or do it all. I can open myself to community. And I, at the risk of sounding super goofy, you just kind of open yourself and you sit for a couple weeks and you see, like, what comes in and what possibilities are there. But it's like, I think you're just in this evolution around, your sense of self and your identity. And, once upon a time, there was a lot of, maybe more criticism. And then you moved into, like, a softer version of that. And then you overcompensated on the other side. And you're just wiggling around, figuring out, where self is in all of this, which is a messy process. It is not, I cannot put it in an Excel spreadsheet for you. But I think, it's funny because we had this plan maybe to talk about the freeze pattern, but, like, I think this is so much more important because it's this, what you kept coming back to was this, like, self-esteem piece. And so there's something really important here about how your motivation to do this is connected to your sense of self, how we establish these expectations of ourself to build self, but that, there's a more organic process often that, like, needs to take place that we can't necessarily plan. You go into the maze, you turn left, you turn right, you go, oh, we need to go this direction. And I just, like, think those expectations are not as important as what's ready to grow for you right now. And if you sit down at the end of the day and you're like, what would perfect look like? Not like perfect, but, like, what would more ideal look like here? It's like, well, somebody would be helping me. Cool. Like, maybe it's possible, Yeah. I certainly would not have predicted that I would have found a producer that was willing to help me at the level. She, like, built me Excel spreadsheets, dude. Like, she was like, she killed it. And it is killing it, is in the process of killing it. And it was then the jumping off point that I needed to build the structure for myself. And now I've, like, embedded everything in a CRM and go high level. But, like, I would not have done that if this woman hadn't come along and served me the way that I needed to be served, because I was serving her the way that she needed to be served, right? And as we move around the world, and I think, you can obviously pull this from music. It's like, like, sometimes you're just creating on your own, and then sometimes you're in a band, and then sometimes you find a duo, and then sometimes, so I don't know. I think there's the unifying thing here is, maybe this is less about pushing through, and this is more about a couple of these different things, including, there's movement here around, like, leaning into areas of shyness or embarrassment to allow my craft to unfold. Or, like, there's areas where I could be supported in this that might move me faster. And where would a win-win be? Like, where would and you don't need to figure it out, but like there must, someone wants to collaborate with you or somebody wants to, this, and maybe at this point you're willing to give up some control if it means this thing is able to be created. And maybe what was so important once upon a time is less important now because you've grown. So I hope some of that is vaguely helpful in some way.
Yeah, I think after this, I am going to do probably just like a sit down brainstorming session, just like write out everything and connect some dots and think about, how I want to move forward.
Yeah. I never expect somebody to leave session with the answer, but I love if they can leave with a process for self-discovery. Because what I've learned doing this long enough is like, I don't fucking know. But if I can be the context that allows you to discover some of these edges that you want to explore, then I definitely consider that a win. And I don't care what the Excel spreadsheet says, because this was, I think, important for you to find some pieces that can move. It's time to go. All right. So thanks so much, Wren. Any sort of like closing us out today, like maybe one or two things that feel the most poignant for you?
I think that my podcast, the structure of it does not have to look how I've thought it had to look. I can get out of this tunnel vision and I can expand and think about other options that are serving me and not me serving my podcast. And then also to getting creative about accessing creativity and, I guess taking myself, again with the tunnel vision, but in a separate context of taking myself out of, I can't play piano, so I'm not going to do anything, but zooming out a little bit and, thinking about what would serve my creativity, what can I do? So that, I think in both ways that shift in mindset.
Cool. Sounds like you want to do a full body aria. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. I gotta really like sing my heart out right now.
Yeah, I think it's great. So thanks so much for coming back with us, Wren. We really appreciate it. I love these coaching episodes because the point is like, hey, look, this isn't scary, guys. We're just talking about things and we're sort of exploring it in a way, hopefully with somebody who is trained with specific skills that can effectively help you look around the room and flash some lights at some stuff and figure out where the furniture is. So if this episode resonated with you, that's exactly why we're building this. The work that you're doing matters, and it's not meant to be done alone. So make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, and share this with another leader in your life who's ready for something deeper. You can also follow along on Instagram at Evolving Lives Inc. between episodes for more tools, reflections, and real conversations, and let us know what you want to explore next to help you on your journey. For me, this is bigger than just a podcast. It's a movement. It's a community of authentic leaders that are choosing to grow, heal, and step into who they were meant to be so we can make the impact that the world actually needs. Thanks for being here. And as always, let's keep evolving on purpose together.